What I'm about to tell you is going to be very difficult. No. No.
The New Mutants is the last final entry in the Fox X-Men franchise that will ultimately ever be remembered only for being the movie that had more release dates than most other full franchises. The sheer amount of times this film was delayed and pushed back, it's almost as if Fox was doing everything in its power to prevent us from seeing it. And having now finally seen it, I understand why. To put it gently, New Mutants is very much among the least greatest new movies I've come across this year, right down there with such instant classics as Artemis Fowl. I will say that the third act here is partially watchable, but everything before that, not so much. The basic idea here is that we have these young teenage New Mutants being held at this mutant facility in order to come to grips with their scary powers that they're just now beginning to manifest and experience. Pretty cool concept. But that's where the positivities end, because in practice, the first 70% of it especially is a steaming hot unwatchable mess ruined by what clearly were endless reshoots and reworkings done by multiple different writers and filmmakers and studio executives, which is what I knew this video would be about. Except that there were no reshoots at all, because apparently Fox and then Disney after that just kinda didn't bother. And that left me pretty confused, because the movie I just saw showed clear undeniable signs of a movie that was made and then remade by more than one consistent vision. It's nonsensical, it's shallow, and overall it's pretty excruciatingly boring. But once I looked into it, turned out that there were reshoots, just not in a traditional sense. Basically, this film was envisioned by one writer-director, but then the studio for whatever reason wasn't happy with that vision, and so during pre-production they kept bringing in all these different people to change it. Not to replace the writer-director with someone else, but just to change his vision for him, to the point where there were up to 7 different writers simultaneously telling him what to and not to do, which turned out to be pretty effective because that's what the ultimate product is, an unwatchable mutated pile of all these different conflicting incompatible visions. And that's what the point of this video is, to figure out how exactly having multiple wildly different cooks in the kitchen ultimately ended up destroying this whole movie, so that if and when you get in the same situation, you'll know what to watch out for. Here's why it is so dangerous to reshoot or rework a film with multiple different visions. Here's how you make a movie so bad that the studio behind it would rather not let anyone see it. First off, having multiple different visions control different sections and aspects of a movie can very easily lead to those sections and aspects losing all establishing connection to each other, which makes the movie follow no logical sense. The best example of this here is the basis for the entire film.
What's happening?
We have to run! As fast as we can!
We open on our hero Danny waking up to run away from this tornado or some sort of weird unnatural force attacking her community, leading her to first lose her dad, and after that, her consciousness. Then she wakes up in this hospital that quickly turns out to be not a traditional hospital at all, but instead...
The reason you survived is because you're a very uncommon girl. Do you know what mutants are? This is a facility for young mutants like yourself. Teens who need some extra care before they can go on to live healthy adult lives.
Right, suddenly this doctor shows up and explains that Danny is actually a mutant starting to manifest her powers, which is why she's now here to get help in identifying those powers and getting through it. And it's like, wait a second, how exactly did we go from Danny running away from some sort of unnatural force to her being a mutant in need of help to deal with her mutant powers? Like, you haven't established that Danny knows about mutants, you haven't established that Danny is a mutant. Aside from your title, you haven't even established that mutants exist. And so now that Danny just goes along with the process of trying to figure out her abilities before she even knows she has abilities, it makes no sense.
It's important we find out exactly what your power is, so we can help you control it. And how do you know I'm a mutant? The man I work for has a way of recognizing new mutants the moment their condition reveals itself.
The whole basis is the equivalent of you getting in a car accident and then waking up in a rehab center. The only way that makes sense is with the connecting puzzle piece that you were drunk driving. But in here, that logical connection doesn't exist, because whoever made the intro clearly wasn't aware that it was supposed to justify what comes after. It's not like Danny shows any evident hints of her powers in the intro to prove that mutants exist and that she is one. It's not like what's happening happening is in any way presented to be her doing. It's not like at the hospital she first sees the other teenagers showcase their mutant powers before she accepts all that verbal mutant information the doctor feeds her. No, the movie just tells us that Dani is a mutant and that she needs help in controlling herself, before it's even been established that there is something there to control. And as a result, congratulations, the whole foundation for your movie is pure illogical nonsense.
What I'm about to tell you is going to be very difficult.
And you'll find bigger and smaller cases like this throughout the movie. We have this moment of the mutants drugging the doctor to sleep so that they can do all these crazy wild teenage activities, like which is mainly just pretty weird because we've never seen the doctor actually prohibit them from doing any of this stuff. The only thing we have seen is her stopping them from fighting each other, which isn't what they do here. We have a moment of the Stranger Things guy touching a laundry machine and then being transported into this scary vision of his past, before we've had any smaller establishing build-up to this vision to know if it's like a new thing he's now starting to see or just something he experiences every day. We have a moment at the beginning where Dani tries to run off from the property, before it's even made clear that she's a prisoner here or where exactly she's even running off to, since she has already accepted the verbal information that her whole community is dead. Overall, events just occur and characters just act. Not because those occurrences and actions are based on and logically connected to each other, but because, as per all these different visions doing all these different things, it ultimately just kinda is what it is. Secondly, because there are multiple different views on a movie's characters and the actions they're prone to take, those characters very easily lose the organic core of who they are and become just shallow two-dimensional caricatures. Look at, for example, The Russian Girl. To give this film some credit, one thing it does do well is give each of these teenage mutants their own specific backstories that define where they come from, which is very much the case with her.
Never knew their names. They were all the same.
Essentially, the visions of the Russian girl's past visually showcase that she was abused as a kid by all these strangers that came to her house, which is a very powerful three-dimensional basis to influence her actions in the present. But the actions we actually see her perform all come down to pretty much just one thing: being a hostile douchebag to Dani.
Why don't you show Dani around?
And why do I have to? What kind of Indian are you?
Cheyenne.
I wasn't actually asking. Run, you girl, run! Then never mind, you're not invited. What's with the stupid bear? Why don't you show us on the puppet where Daddy touched you? I'm helping her! This is therapy! Oh, I know. I hate her too.
And no matter the angle you try to look at this from, you'll quickly find that the Russian girl's past and actions in the present aren't actually compatible. You can argue that her past experiences of abuse have made her wary of strangers, which is why she now perceives Dani as a threat, because Dani is a new stranger whose power she doesn't yet know, which turns her insecurity into hostile aggression.
16 years old and doesn't even know her power. Seems like that mutant period should have kicked in by now. Leave her alone!
But the reason this doesn't work is because the visions establish her abusers to be men only, whereas Dani is not a man, and so therefore there's actually no psychologically realistic reason for her to perceive Dani as a threat despite her being a stranger. The other argument is that the Russian girl's cruel childhood overall has made her just mad at the world, which could be great, but still doesn't explain why she's being a hostile douche to only Dani specifically. To all the other teenagers, she's usually pretty chill. Not necessarily nice, but at least she's not unpromptedly trying to fight them and kill them. Altogether, the place where the Russian girl comes from does not, psychologically speaking, align with who she is now. Almost as if whoever wrote her backstory wasn't the person who wrote her actions in the present. Which is why she comes off less as a real person and more as a shallow caricature who makes fun of our hero's heritage on an elementary school level for no real reason other than the fact that the conflict has to come from somewhere, I guess.
Hey, Standing Rock. You want a buffalo wing? You people love buffalo, don't you?
And that's the strongest character work here, because the others don't really make any actions to show who they now are whatsoever. Our hero Dani, for example, she's not as much of a doer as she is an empty passive shell that you do things upon.
What's happening?
We have to run! Here! Hide here!
How long do I have to stay here?
Until I decide you're not a danger. Why don't you show Dani around?
Where are you guys going?
Come on, we'll show you.
Come with me, I want to show you something. Where?
I'm ready for you, Dani. We have to go.
We have the Stranger Things guy with a backstory of accidentally killing his dad and co-workers in a mine, who I'm pretty sure does nothing until the finale. We have this guy with a backstory of accidentally burning and killing his girlfriend, who spends most of screen time doing just two things, the laundry and the dishes. We have the Game of Thrones girl, whose backstory consists of her being branded a witch by her church for being a mutant, who also happens to like girls, which as a backstory is fantastic. The same way she's been made ashamed of being a mutant, she's been made ashamed of liking girls. Excellently metaphorically layered. Except that her actions don't really reflect that, considering that in a matter of just a handful of scenes, she has successfully befriended and seduced our hero with the kind of irresistible non-pressuring charisma that the rest of us can only dream of.
Let's live a little longer, Dani Moonstar. Come with me, I want to show you something. Where? It's a surprise. Sometimes I feel like I made you up.
You didn't make me up. I promise you, I'm real.
Mission accomplished. Good work.
All in all, the characters here aren't real lifelike sums of their past experiences as much as they are shallow caricatures behaving to fit these cliché roles just so that the movie can function. Which is what happens when the characters belong to not just one vision, but multiple. Thirdly, having multiple cooks in the movie-making kitchen will very easily also lead to the movie losing its all-encompassing purpose, which makes the whole thing aimless and boring. For example, again, the main basis for the events of this film is that these teenager mutants have been brought to this facility so that they can get comfortable with their new powers and quote-unquote get better, which takes the form of these meetings with the doctor we see many times throughout the runtime. But once you look at these meetings, you'll quickly realize that nothing is actually being accomplished in them, and nobody is actually getting better because, like I talked about before, we don't even know what getting better in practice means. Meaning that all these scenes ultimately are is people just sitting around talking about things that in reality amount to nothing, meaning that the main story engine of getting better meant to move your movie forward isn't actually moving anything, which feels pretty frustrating.
Do I really have to spend my whole life in here?
Once you're better.
I am when am I better?
You're better when I say so.
I'm forgetting this bullshit.
Well, look at the individual vision scare scenes, for example. There is one good foundation laid for a scare when the Russian girl's actions in one scene specifically lead to that scare coming to be later on.
You know the rules. Solitary. Both of you.
But aside from that one instance, the scares in this movie in general are never born out of the characters' motivated actions, but instead happen upon them just randomly. We have this guy having a vision of his dad in a mine, which happens because he's just hanging out in a laundry room for no reason until a laundry machine then begins mysteriously shaking. We have this other guy swimming with the Russian girl, only for her to actually be a scary vision of his burned dead girlfriend, which happens not because he's been trying to get together with the Russian girl this whole time, but kinda just cause.
Sorry, I heard you.
You know, the Game of Thrones girl goes into the church to experience this horrible supernatural scare.
You witch! A flash from your
Which happens not because she has some clear pre-established goal to get done in the church, but more so because someone thought this would be a cool scare and just threw it in. They're clearly trying to rip off the individual scares from the first It movie, but the difference is that there I'm pretty sure the scares always came from what the characters overall were going through and were trying to accomplish. You know, that one kid's overarching goal is to find his dead little brother, which then organically leads to his individual scare being... But in the New Mutants, because these scares aren't born from purpose, because they aren't something we build up to, but instead just these random self-contained events appearing out of nowhere, they're just not scary. And even in non-scare situations, same thing. These scenes don't carry any overarching purpose of character goals and motivations. There are no ultimate obstacles we're always moving towards overcoming. There is no real true organic friction and conflict. Things just randomly happen based on what it is that in that specific self-contained moment needs to happen. We have, for example, this scene where the teenagers go use a lie detector. And why is that? Is there some specific reason they're doing this? Is there some significant obstacle they need to overcome by using the lie detector? Of course not. They just go play with the lie detector for no other purpose than the fact that whichever writer is responsible for the backstories wanted the characters to now talk about those backstories.
Why not?
I get too hot.
My dad gave it to me right before he passed.
Yes, I killed 18 men.
My dad made it for me.
Long
I
years.
was so afraid it was impossible to get me.
And the problem with this is that it makes the whole movie aimless. 20 minutes in, 40 minutes in, hour in, we still have no clue whatsoever what it is we are here to do or what the main point of any of this is, which is incredibly boring to watch. I will say that in the third act this does get better. Now we're being physically attacked by the visions and have to run. Now we're being killed by the doctor and have to fight back and get out of here. Now there is a clear all-encompassing purpose to what we're doing. One united purpose that gives direction to multiple scenes as a whole as opposed to them being just random self-contained moments. But at this point it's a bit too late because for a full hour now it's been a total opposite. One filmmaker wants to do this, one studio executive wants to do that, one writer wants to reveal this and that information. We have all these different people trying to do all these different things, which big picture-wise ultimately results in nothing actually getting done. And so, yeah, if you're making a movie where the writer-director's vision isn't what you want, then maybe let that writer-director go and bring in someone else whose vision is what you want. Maybe don't just keep that writer-director on and bring in all these other incompatible people as well to tell him what his vision needs to be. Because most likely, this is what happens.